Let's tell you now about Cabinet. It has approved the signing of the African Medicines Agency Treaty. The agency will play a critical role in integrating traditional medicines manufacturing into the global pharmaceutical value chain. This is a critical step towards improving global pandemic preparedness for the benefit of all humanity. To weigh in on this development and the potential it creates for herbal and traditional medicines, we're joined by Botanist Dorca Lekganyane. Thank you very much for availing yourself this morning. Maybe let's start with the AMA, right? What is it about? Unfortunately, I think you're muted. If you could just please unmute yourself for us.
Morning. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Ah, great.
So what is the African Medicines Agency about?
Okay, so the African Medicines Agency Treaty, it's basically all of the African continents coming in under the AU, and they have decided, you know what, we're going to take hold of what is medicine, or what is defined as medicine for Africans, and what we're going to do is establish pharmaceutical grounds where we as Africans can actually manufacture our own medicines and have them given to our own people, versus what is currently a very dominant thing that is happening where, you know, most of our medicine is from Western entities, and they come in, get regulated by Western cohorts, and are actually given to our people. So we're saying this is medicine from the people to the people, basically.
Sure. The pharmaceutical industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And so the continent going independent is quite a big step. When we talk about indigenous knowledge systems, especially where medicines is concerned, how important is it for this agency to cultivate that?
It is the pinnacle. It's actually why the agency is created. We have such a large and vast knowledge as to, traditional medicines, but nothing has been documented. So this is a step into documenting what is there and actually using that documentation to create something for Africans. So it's basically us taking on our ancestral knowledge, putting it down and cultivating something that can be used in a very, if you would, slick modern way. So it's all the medicines that we have used will be documented down in what we call pharmacopoeia, which is actually where our indigenous knowledge will come from. From anyone in Africa will put their indigenous knowledge down in that book, and that will be used as a key point for developing pharmaceuticals going forward in the AMA.
Sure. We are such a vast continent, right, with vast ways of treating anything from the common cold to a headache. So in terms of picking out what then would be best as all of this research is done, how do you foresee that will play itself out, especially given that most countries have their own bodies that actually regulate medicines?
The good thing about the AMA is they're actually saying, okay, with whichever country has actually signed the treaty, there will be an establishment, the AMA establishment, wherein you'll actually take known medicines without it being intellectual property against intellectual property, and they will. Let's say there's a medicine derived from plants that is established in South Africa, and you can only find the plants in South Africa. That medicine will be cultivated by the AMA people in South Africa, and that will be accustomed to whatever ale has usually been treated. But this also means that we have a ground where we can actually test our herbs and our plants for their efficacy. Maybe something that is normally used for, a cough can now be found to have key medicinal properties for an ale that we regularly would not associate it with. So it's us actually knowing what is in our biodiversity lane in terms of plants and animals, and it's also about us widening our knowledge as to which plants can be used and which key components from the plants can be used. So we are basically doing what the traditional healers have been doing, but in a much more regulated manner.
Sure. It's quite exciting, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the Asians that have got that on lock in terms of using their own indigenous knowledge systems where medicines are concerned. But is there a fear that there could be interference, from big pharmaceutical companies that don't even necessarily exist on the continent, right? What kind of loopholes will we have to jump for lack of a better expression, before we can actually realize this? It goes as far back as how many years? It's been quite a while in the making.
Thousands.
Yeah.
Actually, I would not say there's any fear. I am for the AMA treaty because this is actually Africans doing what Africans need to do in Africa, versus where you would normally find someone like a traditional healer who actually has a remedy, but then that information gets stolen and the medicine becomes westernized. So now that will not happen. That will not occur, because if you do allow the AMA to take legal, your IP, it's an African medicine created by an African for an African, whereas it's not going to be industrially poached, if you will, by Western medicine. We are very lucky to have China, who have gone through the majority of the loopholes that we are actually questioning. It was a matter of, when does this actually happen? When do we begin? Because we have the richest biodiversity in the world, but we seem to not be doing much with it. So this goes a long way for healing in Africa.
The possibilities are endless, right? So not just physical healing, but maybe like holistically, spiritual as well, if you will. So what kind of work is being done, to your knowledge at least, in terms of perhaps cancer treatment, in terms of treatment of other, not just rare disease, but what kind of treatments or work is being done around that?
The thing with South Africa and us actually rectifying the treaty is that in the World Health Organization, our agency or regulatory agency is classified as maturity level 3, which is pretty high for any state in Africa. So we have vast knowledge into manufacturing of certain medicines. I know we were on the cusp of releasing our COVID vaccine before WHO declared that as not a red state. So there are a lot of advancements in terms of manufacturing. It was always a matter of, how do you now liaise with the people with the knowledge and the people with the manufacturing capacity? How do you treat the traditional healers and the business and government? How do you get all those individuals into a room and actually allow them to create something that is for Africa? So here you know that there's going to be great leaps in terms of development, because this is an African establishment where, you will not be phased, and the right credit will be given to the right people. And what is cultivated from the AMA will be something that can be used holistically. We do know, if you do walk into most of your pharmacies, you find African traditional medicines now that is put up on shelves. So this is a means to also regulate those sort of outputs. Is the product viable? Can it be shipped to other countries within Africa, and other properties, so on and so forth?
Sure. It sounds so delicious, and you're absolutely right. I guess buy-in from the people who are already cultivating and who are already dealing in African medicines will be crucial. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we can afford this morning. Botanist Dorca Lekganyane.